Hello, and welcome to another episode of This, That, and the Other. On the last show, I discussed Mann's potato chips, and I found a little bit more information on them. One person on the Vienna Facebook page talked about how great they were, and another person at work's uncles during a football game was talking about how I wished Mann's potato chips were around. I was listening to a tape of a 1978 Redskins post-game show, and the Redskins game, one of the sponsors was Mann's Potato Chips, and they were advertised as being the best tasting potato chips. The World Series is approaching, and the St. Louis Cardinals are hosting the San Francisco Giants, and Baltimore Orioles are hosting the Kansas City Royals. I like both the Cardinals and Orioles, and hope to see these two teams in the World Series this year. Both teams are at home, so that is on their side. The Baltimore Orioles were, prior to being in Baltimore, the St. Louis Browns, and I looked up some information on the St. Louis Browns and thought this might be enough for like a 30-second show or 1-minute show, but what I found in the St. Louis Browns history was a lot more. That it's going to take a lot more than 30 seconds to a minute to do this one. The St. Louis Browns were, prior to being the Browns, called the Milwaukee Brewers, and they moved to St. Louis in 1901. And the 1901 season was a lame duck season for the Brewers, as they couldn't find a suitable owner. They played in St. Louis for 50 years and moved to Baltimore after the 1953 season. The American League president Ban Johnson found a suitable owner. Carriage maker Robert Lee Hedges bought the team. Interestingly enough, the St. Louis Cardinals were originally called the St. Louis Browns in the 1880s and were later named the Cardinals. In 1909, he rebuilt Sportsman's Park, but only had four winning seasons between 1902 and 1922, but they still trounced the Cards in attendance. In 1916, he sold the club to Philip de Catesby Ball. He spent a lot to build a winning franchise. A series of blunders doomed the franchise. Shortly after buying the team, he fired Branch Rickey, who was promptly hired by the Cardinals. 4 years later, Ball allowed the Cards to move out of dilapidated Robeson Field to share Sportsman Park, and the Cards' owner was Sam Breeden. The sale helped the Cards build a farm system, and that's what started a reversal in fortune for the Cardinals. The star players had helped the Cards draw more power than the Browns, and the owner increased the seating capacity from 18,000 to 30,000, hoping that the Browns were going to be in that World Series. They came very close to being the Yankees out for the pennant, but ironically, the Cardinals were in the 1926 World Series. Ball died in 1933, and the team was bought by Donald Lee Barnes. His son-in-law, Bill DeWitt, was the GM. By 1941, he realized they couldn't make money in St. Louis and tried to move the team to Los Angeles. The approval was supposed to take place on December 8th, but the disastrous Pearl Harbor attack happened on December 7th. Because of the travel restrictions, the proposal was rejected. During World War II, the Browns won their only pennant in 1944, and critics thought that it was a fluke that the Browns were able to field a team like that. They had players that were unsuitable for military service. At the time, most of the major league players ended up being pushed into military service during the war. The Cardinals lost that series in 6 games. After the series, the team was sold to Richard Muckerman in 1945. The team finished 81-75, third place. That was the last year the team had a winning season. He put more money into improving the stadium than the team. He sold to DeWitt in 1949 and DeWitt was unable to reverse the team's fortunes. He was forced to sell good prospects to the Tigers and the Red Sox to pay bills. In 1951, Bill Veeck, former owner of the Cleveland Indians, purchased the team from DeWitt. First thing Bill Veeck did, he pulled a stunt and brought in a 3'7", 65-pound man, Eddie Gato, to bat as a pitch hitter with a number of 1/8. He walked on 4 pitches and was ordered not to swing. The stunt infuriated the American League president, Will Hardage, who voided his contract the next day. In 1951, he made Ned Garver the highest paid player, and Ned Garver only won 20 games, lost 100. He also brought in Satchel Paige to pitch. He had signed him in Cleveland in 1948 at the age of 42, and at 45, he had a respectable 3-4 record and a 4.79 ERA. Veeck tried to drive the Cards out of town. Veeck's team never finished better than 31 out of first place, and the last 2 years in a row, they lost 100 games twice. His all-out assault on the Cardinals came during a downturn when the Cardinals lost Branch Rickey to the Brooklyn Dodgers. In 1942, the Cards owner Fred Say was convicted of massive tax evasion in late 1952, and it looked like the Cardinals were going to move to Houston. Say accepted a lower bid from Anheuser-Busch. Gussie Busch jumped to keep the Cards in St. Louis. Veeck realized that he was finished in St. Louis and reluctantly ceded the Cards to St. Louis and decided to move the Browns. He sold Sportsman Park to the Cardinals. It was a necessary move as the 44-year-old park had fallen in disrepair and rent from the Cards didn't bring in enough revenue to bring it up to code. He attempted to move them back to Milwaukee, which was blocked by AL owners. The attendance had fallen to 360 average, or 3,860 average per game. Last season, the team finished 54-100, 46 out of first. Last game was a 2-1 loss to the Chicago White Sox in extra innings. After the season, Veeck cut a deal to move the Browns to Baltimore. He would sell his 80% to Miles and other Baltimore investors, and Veeck would remain as the principal owner. Voters voted against it, and he was forced to sell his entire stake to Miles for $2.5 million. A Baltimore brewer, Gerald Hofberger, became the largest shareholder, and Miles was president and chairman of the board. His first act was to request permission to move the team to Baltimore, which was swiftly approved. That's basically the history of the St. Louis Browns and their move to Baltimore. Like I said, I would like to see a St. Louis-Baltimore World Series, and we'll see what happens. Kind of like a rematch of 1944 World Series, but not quite. And as always, thanks for watching.